Are you working or are you not working? You are working. There we go.
Always working.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Remind podcast. I'm Dr. Ashleigh Moreland and I am joined by my co-host, David Masterton. In today's episode, we're going to unpack a little bit about my key takeaways from the Childhood Trauma Conference that was just held in Melbourne recently. It was a week-long or 6 days long conference, which was very intensive, very big and heavy, and lots to learn and lots to take away. And what was so encouraging was hearing so many people speak on topics that we have been across. So I love that. It was very affirming. But I wanted to share a few things that were even really new for me, which I thought was just so exciting. So the first thing that we're going to cover in today's episode is some research that I thought was very fascinating, where essentially parents and children, the research involved parents and children, the parents who essentially got it wrong, and I use, air quotes for got it wrong, which is basically where the kid got bored or cried or disengaged, and the parent was attuned to the child, received their feedback, and adapted their response. So this is literally the name of our parenting program, is responsive parenting, because I've seen time and time again how protective and how important it is for secure attachment and psychological safety to have people who can observe and respond. And that was really interesting to me, because what they showed is that those people or the kids of the parents who literally got it wrong 50% of the time, but were able to respond to their child's needs and adapt based on that unique moment, literally had more secure attachment, they were more regulated, so less dysregulation, and healthier function, compared to the kids of parents who only got it wrong 15% of the time. So literally 85% of the time, those parents were able to prevent that child's upset, because they were able to predict their needs and adapt before they got upset. But I just found that so interesting, because obviously the worst case scenario is for the parent to get it wrong and not respond, to completely ignore, because that was then obviously really harmful to connection, to attachment, to regulation and perceived safety. But
And just before you go any further, what does getting it wrong look like in an example? Give us an example of what would getting it wrong look like.
It sort of changes depending on how they set up the research, but often it'll be things like the parent will try and engage the child, and if the child loses interest, disengages, if the child starts crying, that would be considered the parent misread or mismatched or got it wrong. But it depends on the context, right? So I didn't quite want to get hung up in research design or research methods here, because I think the moral of the story is a bigger picture, more important. And in my experience, I guess, like childhood trauma and complex PTSD, relational trauma, predominantly is adults who, as children, their parents couldn't respond to them. And so if they had a need, if they had an emotion, if they had an experience, their parents' incapacity or inability to be able to respond to that child's needs in the moment missed the opportunity to create safety, connection, attachment, and allow the child to develop a sense of trust that it's okay if things kind of mess up, because they've got me, a sense of trust that when I have a big feeling, they're here, they've got me. But interestingly, the hypervigilance thing, the parents who only got it wrong 15% of the time, they were so much more hypervigilant and trying to predict the child's responses before they even happened to prevent that upset. And I think the hard thing about this is, well, why is that a bad thing? Well, if you think about it, in order for us to be constantly anticipating, in order for us to be constantly trying to predict and trying to be hypervigilant, scanning for threats to prevent them in the first place, we are dysregulated. We're in a state of survival, trying to avoid or prevent the discomfort from happening. And so if we can avoid or prevent the discomfort, then we are comfortable. That's the survival instinct, right? But what we very clearly know is that when we as a parent, or even as a leader in a business, or even as the authority figure in a friendship group, if we are dysregulated, we convey threat to the group or to the child or to our subordinates in the workplace. And I think that is such a impactful take-home message to go, you know what? If you screw up, it's okay. You can repair. But if you screw up and you avoid and you ignore, that's psychologically unsafe and emotionally dangerous. If you try and be so hypervigilant to prevent ever screwing up, and there's like that perfectionism and control stuff coming in, then that is probably not very healthy. So I just thought it was really interesting. It was encouraging for me to kind of go, it's okay, just relax. Don't worry about screwing up so much. Just know that if you screw up, you can take ownership, you can respond, you can turn it around, and actually owning our mistakes and changing course creates trust.
I'd almost like to reframe getting it wrong and screwing up, because it seems like, from what you're saying, and I might be going off on a wrong tangent here, and I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, is that if we can't predict what the child's wanting, to then somehow get that child to respond in a way which is either calm or balanced in our eyes, right? And I think that's very important as a parent, in our eyes, that, you know, we're sort of getting it wrong. But, and that might lead to, say, for example, the child says, I want to have donuts for breakfast. And we go, no, that's it. And then they have a tantrum. We've got it wrong. Just as a very broad example, right? And getting it right might mean, okay, well, can I have donuts for breakfast? Well, that might be, okay, why don't you have this breakfast, and maybe we can have a donut after dinner with, you know, as a dessert, and then da-da-da-da. And if they go, no, I want it now. Okay, tell me why you want it now. And like, we're kind of keeping our composure. This is, in my basic mind, I'm trying to think of how I'd get it right, trying to really boil it down to some fairly simple examples, right? And so, but based on that, I think there's some context, and I'm not challenging the research. I think the research is fascinating, because I'm kind of I'm happy to be the 50%er, not to give myself an excuse to, you know, get it wrong and then recover, but more from the sense of, imagine for a moment that person or that parent that's getting that 85%. And their child is, for that time, that parent's predicting it. Are they predicting it because the child is now hypervigilant as well as to what the parent needs? Because, let's say for an example, if for 15% of the time that parent doesn't acknowledge the child, either I hit it or it doesn't exist, they use justification and these kind of things, it kind of means that they're training the kid to accept that 85% and the way it is. So it's almost fine-tuning the child to only act a certain way, because still waters run deep in children. Because sort of like, okay, because the only way you're going to measure it is based on behaviour. And if it's all repressed, then it's not like you can measure the nervous system through eyesight necessarily, right? But it's interesting that this data that sort of goes, it's not necessarily about creating the conflict, it's acknowledging the conflict and how you resolve or
repair,
go through it that way, which I think is super important, because life isn't about chasing perfection. Teaching kids is not going to be about, oh, you know you're doing a good job when there's no conflict. Actually, you know you're doing a good job when there's no change in conflict levels, but you're at peace with it. Like that,
in fact,
that's like your ultimate.
Conflict is actually considered, so in Patrick Lencioni's work, he has written a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and lack of conflict is a dysfunction of a team. There is meant to be conflict, because conflict at least means that it's safe enough for people to express their opinion. It's safe enough for people to have a voice. And it's unreasonable if there is zero conflict, if there is zero pushback, if there is zero expression of alternative viewpoints, then that indicates at a cultural level that either people don't feel safe or they're checked out.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
reasonable or healthy to think that every single person in a group of people would have the same opinion on everything always. So if there is an absence of conflict, that's okay. It doesn't mean to say that everyone's voice is going to be the final voice, because you can't have that. Like at some point, there's got to be a decision made, and that decision is going to be for some and against others. But there has to be a platform, like it has to be okay. It has to be okay for the child to express that they're not happy about not getting a donut for breakfast. And it's also okay that they still don't, even if they're upset about it. So I think the context of research is, and the risk of this, the risk of people hearing me say that, where they think that getting it wrong is child is upset and getting it right is child's not upset, is that the risk is they fall into fawning and they think that their role as a parent is to make sure their child is always happy. That's not it. That's not it.
That would be, huge,
that's not it at all.
Red flags,
that's not my, that's a don't hear what I'm not saying kind of moment. But what is really important is actually understanding that the importance of attunement. It's the adult or the parent or the leader or whoever it is in whatever context is attuned to be able to validate and hold space for the experience of the other person. Like
without actually agreeing with the outcome.
Yeah.
So
you don't have to change your mind. You don't have to go, oh, sure, we can have lollies for breakfast. That doesn't have to be the outcome. But the outcome still, in terms of responding, in terms of attunement, the outcome is still, I can understand why you're upset about not having lollies for breakfast. I'm here if you need me. It's about what they're feeling and being able to nurture the feeling.
And so, in a sense, getting it wrong, and again, I know I'm sort of chasing that because I'm trying to get, for people that are maybe thinking, what does getting it wrong mean? Because it's a very broad thing, like what's right versus wrong. And so it might be that if a child asks for a donut, and I'll stick with the same thing so it's easier to, that you say no, the child goes into a bit of a tantrum, and then by that, you think the child's being unreasonable, it triggers something within you, you start to escalate, and you then say to the child, go to your room, right? Get out of my face. Why the hell do you think having a donut is appropriate? There are sometimes food. You should be having healthy. I'm doing this for you. You don't want to get fat, do you? And then that's sort of like that. What you're sort of doing is creating in them a heightened sense of either shame or feeling unsafe because you can be seen as attacking or whatever it is. And you're not attacking the child, you're attacking the concept, right? And so they're being unseen, unheard, all of those things. And to be honest, this example in my childhood, this is exactly how it probably would have played out, right? Because as parents back then, the way they were raised was exactly the same way, if not even more strict. And the idea of having a donut for breakfast is absurd. Unless you ask the adult version of me, I'm like, well. But the right way to do it is to sort of go, oh yeah, well look, donuts is not a breakfast food. However, I do love donuts. Tell me, what made you think about having a donut for breakfast? Like, I understand they taste really good, but if you're always having these sometimes food, what do you think are going to be some of the ramifications or the consequences? And then maybe bring it into a small conversation. Not everything has to be a negotiation. Then say, okay, well, maybe since you've been, good or something like that, when should we organise to have a donut? It might not be today. It might be Friday night when we watch a movie or whatever it is that you handle. And then even as you're going through all of that and the child still says, no, I want it now, I want it now, I want it now. And you sort of say, well, look, the good news is you're a child, I'm an adult. There is a difference in dynamic here. I'm here to raise you. I say no. If you don't want to talk about it, I understand, but we're not talking about it anymore. It's over. But I'll let you know next time I feel like you can have a donut or something like that, without raising the energy, without raising your own dysregulation. And I think that's where it's sort of like getting it right and wrong. Can the parent stay regulated while the child's unregulated? And I think that's kind of the core definition. And because, geez, I've been there, where the child says something and as soon as, I can always look at it and go, no, I would do it this way because I'm so healed. I'll never get, no, I get triggered. But how you get from unregulated back to regulated and walk your child through it, I think is what this study sort of talks about. I think is what you're sort of saying. That it's okay.
I think this is an important point as an ex-researcher, so the way research works is you create some very, very tight methodology, very, very controlled, very clearly defined parameters, very, 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 very tightly controlled. And then you have a results section, which you specifically write about the results of your very, very, very specific context, your participants, your everything, your very controlled experience. And then there's a discussion section. And the thing that I used to love about writing the discussion section is that it's open for conversation. It's literally open for discussion, where you go, okay, so the implications of this, based on what we've seen, hypothetically, if we were to apply this in this other context, this is what it would mean, and this is what it would look like, and this is how it could inform practice, and this is how it could apply to this, and this is what it might look like for that. And that is really, really sometimes far-fetched, because you have not researched that. You have not researched that other alternative opinion or that possible hypothesis. But as a product of the results that you've got in the limited context you've got, you could extrapolate and hypothesize how that could relate to other situations. And that's where I think this is really exciting. That's why I didn't want to get right into the details of the methodology of the study, because to me that becomes redundant. For me, the purpose of research is to invite discussion and think about, well, how could we actually apply this? How could we actually go, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. Isn't it interesting? For me, it takes away the pressure to get it right and to be predicting and to always make my kids happy as such, but understanding that developing attunement, and even if, I guess this even comes down right to, like, if someone says, oh, I'm fine, having the emotional intelligence to be able to tune into other factors other than their words, like their body language, like their tone, and being able to perceive actually not fine, and then following up on that, checking in on that, So
and I think what you're sort of saying there,
it's really important.
Yeah, I think if we had to sort of, in my mind, distill the message of this is the pressure of prediction is not worth it over the capacity to respond as opposed to react. So the reaction is maybe what comes from the fact that you're so highly focused on trying to predict everything, and the pressure to predict, it takes a lot of capacity. So when that fails, there's not much left to be able to respond. So the chances of reacting and not being regulated and trying to justify and trying to is not necessarily worth it. So if you sort of sit back and be a little bit more in the moment, allow the emotions to come out through the child, allow the emotions to come out through yourself, and then be able to come back to a point of response, not to squash your emotion. You're allowed to, you need to feel it, you need to let it through you, you need to do whatever you need to do. But then when you come back to the child and yourself and you're responding, again, it doesn't have to be about perfection. It's about sort of going, okay, this is how we're going to go through it. Oh, and by the way, when I speak to my kids, and especially my teenager daughter who just turned 13 today, I'm finding that she's now not wanting to talk to me like she used to. She's not letting me in on everything like she used to, not all the time. And boy, if I thought I had all my triggers under control, well, that's a freshie. That one's coming at me hard. And it's funny because when these things come up, it's sort of like, I know you're lying. And the big thing that pops up, I'm not stupid. Don't lie to me. Don't think what are you doing when you lie? You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know you're lying? You don't. And that's everything that's coming up. But what comes out of my mouth while I'm feeling that is, okay, I kind of sense not everything is as you're saying, but I kind of feel that you want to keep it to yourself for now. I would like it if you could come to me when you're ready, because I want to keep the channels open. And then maybe later on, I might sort of say, wow, I had a lot come up when you told me that. Not that you need to do anything about it, but if you sense something from me, because you said before about the child responds to how we're feeling, we could be saying everything perfectly. Excuse me, Your Honour, I never said that in a court of law. Our body language could be, I did not raise my arm, I did not put my fist through the wall, I did not slam the door, I did not storm off. I acted completely normal. But energetically, you could be, a fireball 10 feet out in a radius around you, and that's all being picked up on energetically. And so to be able to circle back to that and just let them know that when they did that, you did that, chances are they're going to escalate and you're going to escalate. But to then say that, and then turn around and go, no, but I did nothing wrong. Yeah. I didn't say anything wrong. I did not act wrong.
Oh my gosh, actually, you're talking about 25-year-old Ash. That's exactly, literally, play by play, exactly how 25-year-old me would have behaved.
So again, I think it's just more about, I love how you sort of said before, it's just going from that reactive, which is a justifying, which you might get to because you're constantly trying to predict and putting all this pressure on, so there's no capacity to just respond through a thought process, through allowing your emotions to come out. And I think it's beautiful and incredible. And I love to see that there's more and more research being going into less perfection, more capacity, right? Absolutely. Without being irresponsible, feel free to stuff things up as long as you have the ability to bring it back. And again, obviously there's outlying scenarios here that doesn't work, but focusing on that. So, good one. I reckon we'll finish up on that one. And but again, parents, I know we seem to have a lot of love and critiquing for how parents have raised in childhood trauma. But again, parents, you're not the issue. You're not you are the cause. Just like, childhood trauma starts from parents and environment, but that's not a problem. Again, don't be perfect. Be part of the response. Now, that could be within the moment. That could be a day later, a week later, or 20 bloody years later, right? Don't put the pressure on. It's never too late. And this is all part of, I suppose, the changing of the guard, the new consciousness that is being sort of set. But we got to recognise it. I wanted the donut for breakfast.
Yeah. And being so safe in being in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We're with you in this, guys.
That's it.
Thanks for being here.
Like, subscribe.
Yes, and I was going to say next episode is going into something super juicy that I have never spoken about on the podcast before. We're going to go a bit more into understanding neuro and our nervous system and function and dysfunction and yeah.
Bring it on. Love it.
Yeah.
Okay, till next week. See you later.
Bye.